welcome to our next Flip preaching video as we continue our series Living in Lockdown, as we discover what it means to find God at home in this time. For this week we're going to move away from the resurrection appearances and move back towards the Sermon on the Mount and chapter 6 verses 1 to 18. And we know a little bit about the Sermon on the Mount already, having studied the Beatitudes in Lent and in the run up to Easter. So we know that this sermon is given by Jesus. It's given not just to his disciples, but to a whole crowd of people that had gathered around. And these were a whole mixture of religious leaders, Pharisees, Sadducees, ordinary everyday people, poor people, rich people, a whole collection that had gathered to hear Jesus speak. And at chapter 6, he teaches on three particular things in these verses. He talks about giving, he talks about praying, and he talks about fasting. And there's two major things I just want us to look at in this video. So the first one is this. If you read through those 18 verses, as each section starts, they start with the words, when you give, when you pray, when you fast. Now that's really important because Jesus is speaking to this crowd of all different kinds of people, and he expects them to do these things. It's not a if you give or if you pray or if you fast. It's a when you. Jesus saw this mass group of people from all different kinds of backgrounds. Some of them will have been very religious, some of them probably not much. And yet there's still this expectation that they will give and they will pray and they will fast. And their giving may be in the form of money to the synagogue or to the temple. It may be in the form of giving of their animals or their corn or their grain as a sacrifice offering, or it may just be giving to those people in need that live alongside them. When they pray, there is that expectation that they will pray, and Jews did each and every day. They had particular prayers and for particular festivals. And then finally when they fast, when they do not eat food. So the first thing that we want to look at and want to try and take away is that actually these three things were part of Jesus' life. They were part of his disciples' life. And they were the part of the life of those people who he came and he spoke to. And maybe it's for us to think about, when have I last done those things? When was the last time I gave in some way? And you might be able to say, oh, that's easy. I give, weekly direct debit or I've given in this way. But what other ways might we give? At this time in particular, how can we give to those people around us, our neighbours, and those people we may bump into? Prayer. Prayer is a difficult one, and we'll look at this one the most of all three of these. But what is my prayer life in this time? When am I praying? Am I praying more than I did before or less than I did before? Now, there's some statistics that have just come out from a survey saying people are searching prayer. They want to pray. And I wonder what your prayer life is looking like in this time. Is it different? Has it changed? Is it a struggle or is it actually easier? And then when you fast, have you fasted? Lent was a season where many people take up a fasting of sorts, giving up a particular thing. But have you ever spent time without food? Just allowing yourself to rely on God instead of those things that we normally sustain ourselves with. So there is those questions about when you do these things. And then in each of them, the second thing that we're going to look at, Jesus says to them, he kind of gives them these two examples. One which is the way not to do it. And that's usually in a loud, flashy, look at me kind of way. It's when you give, you do it in a way that shows everyone how rich you are and how generous you're being. Or when you fast, you put on dirt and sackcloth and ashes and you look miserable so people know that you're obviously hungry because you're starving yourself because you're such a good, faithful, religious person. And yet Jesus says in all three of these cases, don't do that. Don't make a scene, don't make a song and dance. Actually do it in such a way that your left hand does not even know what your right hand is doing. Lock yourself away in your room. Make yourself look beautiful and all done up so that no one has any idea what you're doing. And this is fascinating. It's fascinating because it takes away that showy nature, that want to be seen by everyone. And actually Jesus is saying, no, do this in a way that no one else knows. And we see that a little bit in Jesus's life. We see that he's very reluctant for people to go off and shout about the things that he's done. But Jesus always takes himself off to pray so that he's on his own, maybe with only one or two people with him. And the prayer one in particular, I want to think about, because Jesus says, he says, go into your room and lock the door behind you. And again, we've concentrated on stories in which people have been locked inside rooms, whether it's the disciples locked inside the room in the resurrection appearances, or here Jesus says, go and just take yourself away and pray. Pray to your Father, and he's the only one that will hear you. Now, in church, one of the things that I know people find the most difficult, and if I ask this in a room with lots of people and say, let's all pray out loud, most people would look uncomfortable. I would probably look uncomfortable. It's not something that naturally comes to me all the time, although as a church leader, it's something I've had to get used to. But if I was to say to people, pray out loud, there would be people that find that really difficult. Although at this time, it's probably the easiest opportunity we've got to pray out loud in church. When you're watching on the live stream on Thursday night, or if you're joining the circuit service, actually, for most of us, we might be able to get away with praying out loud and no one hearing us but God. If we live with our families, we may get a bit of a sideways look, but actually, if they're joining in with you, maybe they won't mind. We have these three things: giving, praying and fasting, and they're things that we're encouraged to do, but they're also things that we're encouraged to do in a way that is not secret, hidden away, but most definitely not showy. So like I say, think about those three things and when the last time you did them, or how they've developed and changed for you, or actually ask God to show you ways in which you can do them more. Maybe in this time as well, you want to think about how you're doing them. This is a great opportunity in your house with no one else watching to do those things. How can you give in a way that blesses people but isn't in a showy way? How can you pray so that it's not in a way that is in front of a whole crowd of people, but actually just practice praying out loud so that maybe when you are next in a group or church and someone asks you to pray, you're able to do it because you and God have been practicing this day in, day out. Or when you fast, what does that look like? What does that mean for you? As we go through this week, we're going to be meeting 7 o'clock on Thursday again, where we'll share in some worship, some more teaching and looking at these as we try to grow as disciples in this time. But as we have been doing throughout this time, I want to remind you that if you need anything, if you're in need of prayer, support, help in any way, you can contact me or Julie in the office and we'll get back to you. Or leave a message on Facebook or the such like. Let us support ourselves in this time. Let us seek God in this time. Let's ask him what he is calling us to do in this time. There'll be another Flip preaching video next Monday, so look out for that one as we continue in this series. And I will see as many of you who can gather on Thursday night, or if you can't gather then, please catch us on the phone service or in one of the other ways that this is available. Take care everyone. Goodbye.